Hello, welcome to the Green Party of the U.S. Peace Action Committee webinar on ethnic cleansing, past and present. Tonight, we'd like to explore this topic. A number of speakers will comment on the occasion of Indigenous Peoples Day in the United States, also called Columbus Day, and on current events in Palestine that bear a close relationship to the unfortunate history of ethnic cleansing in North America. Our speakers will be Riley Richards, who is a trans liberation activist as well as a socialist organizer based out of Northeast Pennsylvania. She studied the history of Indigenous peoples in the U.S. She's a member of the Green Party of the U.S., Democratic Socialists of America, the NAACP, and Industrial Workers of the World. Larry Littlegeorge is a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation. He's knowledgeable about many aspects of the Native American genocide, including the doctrine of discovery, displacements, disease, and boarding schools. Larry is president of Alliance for Justice, Inc. in Black River Falls, Wisconsin. And Danura Khoury, our third speaker, is a Palestinian in the diaspora currently residing in Ohlone Land, or Oakland, California. She's worked for the past 2 decades as a human rights activist, campaign strategist, and a community organizer. Noura was born in Michigan, where her parents fled after the 1967 war. She lived for 2 years each in Palestine and Egypt, where she witnessed the devastating impacts of U.S. foreign policy on the region. She currently serves on the National Committee of Al-Adwa Palestine Right to Return Coalition, where she conspires to destroy walls and build bridges of solidarity at the intersections of labor, faith, and social justice. She recently returned from doing accompaniment work in the Gaza campaign in the occupied West Bank and will be sharing about their work on the ground. Before turning to our panelists, I'd like to make some general observations about the topic, starting with the definition. If you're unfamiliar with the term, ethnic cleansing is a systematic, often violent attempt to remove members of an ethnic group from a particular territory. It involves a range of tactics, including forced displacement, violence, intimidation, and the destruction of cultural heritage. The goal is to create a homogeneous ethnic region. Ethnic cleansing is distinct from simple conquest, where one nation or force would occupy a country and subjugate its people, leaving them in place under some new jurisdiction. Ethnic cleansing is actually pushing people out of a particular territory for a variety of reasons that our speakers will discuss. So I'd like to ask each speaker to briefly explain their background and their perspectives on tonight's discussion. And we'll start with Riley Richards. Riley?
Hi, my name is Riley, pronouns she, they. I am a trans woman located in Northeast Pennsylvania. My connection to all of this actually comes from my childhood. I was raised for a couple of years on the Pyramid Lake Paiute Reservation in Nevada, and I wasn't exactly well received. I was called a half breed. I was not respected by a lot of people in the community. I was often pushed out. I was not accepted in certain circles. However, as I grew older, I understood why. And while it hurt then, as an adult now, understanding why these tensions exist and understanding the depths of trauma that has befallen the indigenous community ever since first contact, starting with the Taino people, all the way through into what we are seeing now in Palestine. Um, the atrocities that have befallen the indigenous population have been so heavily documented that it inspired fascist leaders around the world to do similar things in their holocausts and genocides. So I am hoping that through this webinar that we can educate on what those occurrences are, and how we as a party and as a society can move beyond it into a greener world of tomorrow that is safer for everyone.
Thank you. Larry, can you make some introductory comments for us, setting the stage for your participation?
Yeah, my dog in this fight? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, back in the 1950s, that's when I was born. And we were placed in foster homes. And in 1964, I had three younger sisters. I was about 11 years old. I had three younger sisters that were in foster homes also. There's the social workers that came to my dad and my mom. We were taken away because, of the alcohol abuse. But anyway, they came to my dad and mother and they said, you got to sign these papers. The three girls, youngest girls, they need a medical procedure. And what they really were was adoption papers. That was in 1964, and we didn't kind of connect with them in 1989, 25 years later. Since then, my dad has passed, and he was always looking for them. So these are the long fingers, the tentacles of the doctrine of discovery. I learned about it when I was in school. So I've known about it for over 50 years. And I educate people on it. It's kind of hard for them to go ahead and to accept these things. I go to colleges and I go to universities. I go to private organizations, nonprofit, and I tell them about the history of the United States through the eyes of the Indians. So tell them about all of the offenses and the atrocities that are happening, and they're still happening. So that's what I do about educating people about the doctrine of discovery and respecting Mother Earth. So that's how I'm here. Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you. And our third speaker, Nora, I will ask to her to unmute and to share something about what brings her to this event.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Noura Khouri, and it's an honor to be here on Indigenous Peoples Day with the original people of this land. Just want to acknowledge that we are sitting on stolen land while these harms are continue to be committed against the Indigenous people here. And it's really hard being a settler in a place where these harms have been committed and not acknowledged and continue to cause harm to so many places worldwide, including Palestine, where my parents fled in '67, and we are still not allowed to return to our historic homeland, despite all the laws and rights afforded to people worldwide. Should the right to return home after so-called conflicts have occurred, but clearly these so-called conflicts, otherwise known as ethnic cleansing or genocide, continue to wreak havoc on our lands and our people through militarism, especially U.S. Militarism. So how I came to this work was I studied international relations at San Francisco State in the 90s at a time where things were so much more hopeful in terms of, you know, kind of globally, economically. It was a much more abundant time. There was the peace process in Palestine taking place. And we sort of hoped with blind faith that there would be progress and peace that was coming down. But sort of watching with you know, a questioning eye, wondering if there was actually any intention of actually moving the process forward in a way that would be, you know, fair and equitable to all peoples. But throughout those years, we saw the settlements doubled in occupied Palestine. We saw, you know, just the level of oppression and the silence from the world community as they saw, you know, believed that there was actual, you know, movement happening, moving forward towards peace. So became clear in retrospect that became a cover for more land theft, more colonization of Palestinian land. And so when 9/11 happened and the, you know, Israeli government used the pretext of the war on terror to go in and, you know, they were bulldozing old people in their homes that couldn't leave in Jenin and Nablus, and just wreaking havoc throughout the West Bank. And it became clear that, you know, the second intifada was here and that the peace process was out the window. And I think, you know, very few people with that have been paying attention have any hope that that was actually intended to bring peace when we see the effects of that. And so I was then introduced to ISM, the International Solidarity Movement, and was really inspired by their work, and as the one few ways that we could be here to put our bodies in between, you know, and provide, you know, some attempt to mitigate this violence and to slow it down. Maybe we weren't going to stop it, but we could at least make it so that they had to answer to someone else other than Palestinians, because the level of dehumanization of Palestinians is so widespread that even when in death, it's rarely reported or even thought twice about as a soldier confronts people just trying to stay steadfast on their land. And so it's, you know, I haven't looked back since. It's been a long road ever since, but I'm truly grateful to be, you know, amongst, you know, on the ground doing work. I lived there from 2005 to 7, following 2003, just being on the ground for 3 months, and learned about, you know, Palestinian steadfastness, their way of working on the land, and just international law, human rights campaigning, and just derived so much strength and beauty from just the culture, and so grateful for the ability to learn from Indigenous, you know, ways of being on the land and of relating to one another. It's not like here where we think we own the land and that we are, you know, have dominion over it. It's more of just a communing with the land and being, you know, accountable to one another and it for our, you know, humanity, and to be able to continue in this ways. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nora. I'd like to try to decompose the topic a little bit and address particular aspects, one of which is rationalization or justification for this terrible practice. If we were to observe a family being thrown out of their home, we would be outraged. But when such things happen on a large scale, where hundreds of thousands, or in some cases millions of people are forcibly displaced, there has to be a rationale. There has to be something to put a facade of justification on this. So I'd like to ask the speakers how the political process worked for covering these evil actions against the indigenous, and also what happened, what's been happening in Palestine. So Riley or Larry, would you like to speak to that?
So yeah, one of the very preliminary things that we need to understand when it comes to ethnic cleansing is it's always done on the basis of religion. I have not studied a single genocide in history that has not had spirituality or religion on a souped up level prior to the actions taking place. And in terms of the indigenous, it started with the doctrine of discovery. When the Papal Bull was published, it greenlit every indigenous population around the world, and not just tribal communities as we know them in North and South America. This included indigenous Africans as well. In fact, in the very opening lines, it says that the people Christendom is allowed to go forth and subjugate every pagan that is on undiscovered land, which was land that was not held by the Christian monarchs. And the first people to encounter this was the Taino people. And even Columbus himself is on record commenting on how gentle the Taino people are. Um, One of the things that I remember that stuck out the most with me about how gentle the Taino people were that they would fight their conflicts with wooden objects like staffs and clubs as to avoid directly injuring their opponent. More or less, combat for the Taino was more like a LARPing or a get together where you have out your differences in a constructed environment. Well, this sort of gentleness, of course, is a gateway for people who want to come in and take the resources, who want to come in and take the land. And it always starts with resources. What was that? Did something?
Just background noise.
Oh, I'm sorry. Larry, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that doctrine of discovery was the foundation of the genocide, and it was, you know, Prince Henry, the Navigator, way back. This is a time when slave trade was great. He gave a church way back then to slaves. So, in a way, that kind of became a way of worshiping. So, a lot of these here atrocities come from this here doctrine of discovery. We had to go ahead and do all these things way back in school, and we translated, we reflective papers and all that. You know, it said that the Pope, is the most powerful man on earth. He is appointed by God to go ahead and, you know, to rule all people. And this included everyone, the Christians, the Moors, the Jews, the Gentiles, every one of them. It didn't make a difference, where you were at. And the idea was exactly to go ahead and claim that because, they wanted to go ahead and take Africa. There was a lot of land there and a lot of resources there. That was made in 1452, 1454 by Pope Nicholas V. And then when they discovered Turtle Island, Pope Alexander VI redone it in 1493. And he said that us Americans, when I talk here, I use indigenous people, I use Native Americans, I use American Indians, and for legal and for For legal purposes, I use just plain old Indian because that's what our treaties were about the American Indians, the Indians. And it stated that us Indians were to come forward of our own free will, and we were to convert to Catholicism. And if not, with the help of God, we shall use force against you, declaring war upon you from all sides and with all possible means. And we shall bind you to the yoke of the church and their highnesses. We shall enslave your persons, wives, and sons, sell you, or dispose of you as the king sees fit. We shall seize all your possessions and harm you as much as we can, as disobedient and resisting vessels. Furthermore, to this your day, this edict, medieval edict, if I do anything now, today, because it became policy, I'm going to be held guilty of any resulting deaths or injuries, because this year has been a just war that was waged against us Indians, and it still has a pulse to this day. So, there's a lot of laws that are made up by these things. Here in the state of Wisconsin, I cannot buy alcohol nor can I buy ammunition. It's perpetrated by this here papal bull way back in the 1400s. They don't enforce it, but it's on the books and it's still there. Just like the laws that if there's three of us Indians in a canoe, say in Denver, Colorado, Wyoming, if three of us are in a canoe, any white man can shoot us because we constitute a war party. And it's laws like that that are still on the books, and they're perpetrated by this doctrine of discovery. So, that's what I have, and that's what I continue to keep talking to these here universities and these educational students that are going out. They said, how come we don't know anything about this? I live right next to a reservation. My friends are Indians. How come I didn't know this at all? I'm mad. I'm going back to my board of education at the school over there, and I'm telling, how come we did not learn any of this here stuff in school? I've been doing this since this end of the 60s, and I was in college way back. All of these things, for every reason that they had way back, I was pretty much young and had a pretty good quick temper, For every reason they had here, I had 10 for them not being here. So, but as times kind of progress, we kind of slow down, and back then we wondered at what, kept the world on fire. Somewhere along the line, somebody forgot to tell me I was outnumbered. So anyway, that's what I kind of tell the people, tell the kids, and it's okay to tell the non-Indians, but I tell you what, when you come to my people, boy, it's hard to go ahead even to convince Indians. There I go again, Indians. So.
Thank you, Larry. So
Yes.
we'll turn to Nora now and ask her to explain what the cover story is for some of the terrible events in Palestine.
Yeah, just so striking how much the past is present and how much this history still impacts us on every single level, from physically, materially, and then emotionally. It's education, everything is impacted by these doctrines, by these colonial narratives that have dominated us so insidiously on so many levels. It's just really, really deep. So I appreciate Larry sharing, from his experience. It's a good reminder of how far we've come and how little progress has been made. So the Nakba, the Palestinian Nakba, otherwise known as the catastrophe for Palestine, was officially began in 1948 when Zionist soldiers and militias came to colonize the Palestine after the Second World War and the Holocaust. And 750,000 Palestinians were forced to flee the land, and 400 villages were depopulated and forced to just dissolved and destroyed. However, the initial strategy of Zionist colonization was also a culmination of European Christian efforts to colonize the land since Napoleon's time. His defeat in Palestine in 1799, soon after the Americas terrorized, they came to terrorize the Americas, was basically the beginning of the Ottoman rule and the subsequent British colonization. So right after he came to the Americas, he came here, and then the European Christians took it from the Ottoman to the British, and the British decided in 1917 to write the Balfour Declaration to Jewish Zionists from Europe to basically to rid themselves of the Jewish problem, to send Zionists to Palestine to colonize the land, and which this began the modern creation of the Zionist state that was continued to be steeped in this racism, this superiority, religious and racial superiority. It's steeped in lies such as the land without a people for a people without a land. However, there is in fact a long, deep, rich history of Palestinians on the land that began 3,200 years ago during the Bronze Age and continues to modern day Palestine in a territory that spans roughly from the Mediterranean Sea to the Jordan River. So the concept of Palestine, contrary to Zionist belief and doctrination, is based in just a long history of religious and cultural diversity that is laid out in a beautiful book called Palestine, a 4,000-year history. And it really goes through the deep, the long, deep history and shares it so vividly. I really highly recommend, if you are interested in that history. It shows about how it started with like the Egyptian, Assyrian texts, and just so much artifacts and identity that's evolved over thousands of years. So, I think part of the main effort of colonial, European colonialism is to distort that history and to teach this history in a way that it reflects their narrative. And we're seeing these struggles and battles playing out very much so today in the battle for ethnic studies in California and nationally, because that history is so critical in maintaining this indoctrination and this continued level of imperialist violence that we're seeing now. It isn't just Israel that is committing this genocide. It is the United States with the Democrats and the Republicans alike, hand in hand with Israel. There's been, great analysts and the thinkers and academics that kind of go back and forth between whether it's Israeli interests or US interests, and truly it's hard to separate. How can we see them as separate? Like they are one and the same at the end of the day. As far as the elite or the policymakers, their interests are to continue to expropriate the land, to control the resources and the people, and anyone who resists, whether it's using armed struggle or nonviolence, must be dealt with, in the most brutal and violent ways. So This is what we're seeing as a direct result of that, hundreds of years of legacy. It is really coming to a head in this way that is becoming apparent and clear for all to see. And it's such a defining moment. But I feel like, yeah, all that history is really is at our doorstep. And this is what the rulers are trying so hard to contain and to hold on to the last threads of this dying empire that's flailing and just on its last legs. So yeah, the resistance is the only thing that's challenging these efforts. But yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Nora. Another thing that stands out in my observing this phenomenon of ethnic cleansing is dehumanization, because to make it easier to do awful things to a large set of people, if you take away their humanity, if you depict them as something non-human or subhuman, that makes it easier, especially for people with aggressive impulses, to carry out these steps. So I'd like to ask the panelists to comment on that and how this type of process of alienating people from their fellow humans was carried out both in North America and now in Palestine. Riley, do you have any comments?
Sorry about that. Dehumanization as a political platform has been around since the earliest days of the Roman Empire. If we look at how Rome subjugated and Romanized the European tribes of Central Europe, we see the foundations of this dehumanization practice. Now, in Romans 1 and 13, in the Christian Standard Bible, it calls upon all members of the Christian nation to be loyal and subservient to their government leaders, because they are chosen by God to be in that position. And if you do not want to feel the rod or the sword, you do not disobey those leaders. That alone is the first step towards the dehumanizing. If when you take, or when the leadership takes your right to a voice and your right to thought, that's a first step. And when we go into fully going through the dehumanization process, we heard Nora talk about it with the Palestinian problem, or the Indian problem, or the savage problem. Every single time the dehumanization starts, they lower the target to being anything below that of human. This was common throughout indigenous culture. It's still prominent. In fact, the doctrine of discovery is still held by U.S. law, McIntosh versus Johnson, in regards to the stolen land, to which America has the right to its sovereignty due to this doctrine, stating that because of this religious document, that this group of people are not as important as this group of people. And then when we see how our United States Constitution came into being from the influence of the Iroquois, we see the significant influence of tribal culture on U.S. policy. But of course, the indigenous and the Africans and anybody else who was not of white Christian descent were not considered equal. In fact, in the Constitution, it clearly refers to the indigenous as savages, and to the unfree people as 3/5 of a person. So we are seeing this systematic dehumanization that keeps coming about when there's a need for resources, when there's a need for land. And of course, when the resources start running out, the people themselves start becoming a resource.
Thanks. Larry, your comments.
Yeah, I think it was pretty well said by the two. And you take a look at the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. But underneath that, about the 33rd line, it mentions the merciless Indian savage. And you look at the Constitution of the United States, him, his, and he, 51 pronouns. People of color are not in there, neither are the women. It's the white male that this Constitution is made up for. Madeline and you, Haig, can be in the same position. You guys can have the same jobs. You guys can have the same duties, responsibilities, but he will get paid 1,000 a week and she would get paid 700 a week. When things happen like that, the Constitution of the United States is working, and that's what we're living under. It's kind of hard to live in a world when you know the truth, and you know what it's all about. My father learned it, kind of the hard way. He fought in World War II. In the 70s, when they used to come up and they used to meet him, they used to come up and see him. These Apaches, these Navajos, all of the Indians that fought with him. They sat there and I used to make the fire for them and I used to go ahead and I used to get the beer for them. And they looked at each other. And it was, why did they go and fight? Why did they go and fight for a country that took everything from them? And they're still taking everything from them. They looked at, not if they were ashamed or something else like that. They were kind of disappointed because you look at the reservations back in the 70s, before 78, when we got our religious freedom. They did not like the position that they had. And as a matter of fact, they kept me out of the service. We have traditions. I have a name. It's Mahi Chio. Mahi is the clouds, Chio is the touch. When I went and I done my physical for the service, they came and they got me and they told me not to. And I waited a whole year before they gave me my Indian name. And inside that Indian name, it states that, there's some war stories that came through it. But the main thing, the bottom line is soldiers have to fight and they're afraid. A lot of good guys got killed going after these here, so-called people that were afraid. Don't want to say, well, when they were cowards. A lot of other good guys got killed going after them. So they said, I'm not a soldier. They said, we want to keep you a warrior because a warrior can keep. A warrior can pick his fights and he's not afraid. We go by traditions, we go by heritage, we go by a lot of things and they try to take that from us. When the Germans and the Norwegians 2 generations ago were inside their houses, your grandfather and them, they said, you no longer speak Norwegian, Norski. You no longer speak Deutsch, German in this household. We're Americans and we speak English. And now the language and everything, that's what retains the valuable part of who we are, of Germans, of Norwegians. That when you lose your language, you lose your culture, you lose your heritage. I asked the Norwegians when I'm kind of inside up here, because there's a bunch of Norwegians and Germans up here. I asked them what loose live is. Loose live, something like that. Loose live, please. Live loose live, I think it is. And they said, no. Are you trying to say lutefisk? And I said, no. Back in the old country, they would take their kids up in the hills where there's no international boundaries up there at all. They take their kids and they would walk with them. They'd show them what nature is all about. They would be hiking and they would be learning about nature and all that. They didn't know that. This is one of the things that they lost. We have a ceremony, we have a tradition for almost anything and everything that we have, that we do. You know, even having a best friend, a chukote. You know, if I grew up and I had a chukote, something more than a best friend, and we grow up, he come to visit me and I see that he had bald tires on his van. And I says, hey, let's go down here. Let me get you some tires. You know, or if he calls me, or if he needs money, or whatever. If I need money, you know, if I need this, he would do the same thing for me. You know, but before you can go ahead and have one of these, everything in your circle, your nucleus family, has to be okay before you can start reaching out of that circle. These are the things that they try to take away from us. And that's what the doctrine of discovery strips you of. You know. So, and everybody said amen. Just a few examples.
Thank you, Larry. And Nora, how do you think dehumanization has unfolded in Palestine?
Well, the level of dehumanization that permeated U.S. Policy, like in normal times, has, continued to create this really intense bias towards Arabs and Muslims, which was bad enough. But now it's so much more dangerous. This level of dehumanization, along with the outright misinformation for Palestinians, has been the engine powering this genocide. Dehumanization, misinformation have literally been what they use to justify the violence, the unjustifiable violence, really, that they're using. And I just, one example that recently happened was at Berkeley City Council. The city council was working on a resolution with the Peace and Justice Commission to put forward finally a ceasefire resolution just a couple weeks ago. And one of the Black actually council or the commissioners was, before, it wasn't even included, but he was like, what about the rapes? What about the rapes? And we've been hearing, why don't we put the Palestinian rapes in the resolution? And I don't know if folks have been seeing, but these alleged rapes and as along with the beheaded babies have been utterly debunked. There's so much evidence proving that none of that happened, and certainly no systematic efforts or violence in those ways. And so, here we are witnessing mass torture chambers, admitted mass rapes, admitted torture across Israel for Palestinian detainees, up to 10,000, taking place without question, with full U.S. support, with full, admissions by these rapists. In fact, these rapists are then celebrated in Israel as heroes. I thought I knew that Palestinians were dehumanized, but I truly had no idea the extent to which that what we're witnessing today would be normalized. And I think that is what is the most painful part of this entire year-long process of grappling with this violence has, shook us as Palestinians to our core. And, questions I've been asking is that, is this how we've always been, or is this just what's becoming revealed in these moments? There's there's full consent with starving Palestinians, with removing US aid for UNRWA, that is the lifeline to Palestinians' survival as far as food and aid and, you know, even basic medicine and needs. When there's zero evidence proving that any UNRWA employees were active in October 7th, which as Palestinians, you know, we say it was a prison break. Like that was the attempt for Palestinians to break free from their chains that they've been, you know, for at least 17 years, they've been held by, you know, in the most brutal, barbaric occupation in history. Like, so the depth and level of this dehumanization is something that I think we will be studying for decades to come. And those that, you know, just accept it are, you know, I think that at this point, there is no two sides with regards to, you know, humanity. It's literally just you're either for genocide or you're against it. Like those are the only sides that are going to define us in history, like how we acted in this moment, what we did, what we didn't do, how we spoke up, how we stood by, you know, those that are most oppressed. There's just no excuse anymore. The information is literally at our fingertips, and I acknowledge it's really, really painful and difficult to look away, but the guilt, I mean, to not look away, I mean, to see the horrors that are unfolding before our eyes is the only thing that's harder is not witnessing the guilt of, you know, just letting Palestinians go through this genocide alone and not standing by to offer our solidarity, our meager efforts are the very least we can do. And I think that has been the thing that's kept Palestinians going. They see the efforts that are you know, happening throughout the globe and by the people who have been standing, you know, for at the university levels, at civic and civil society, shutting things down, disrupting all these politicians and their lies, trying to go on with business as usual. Palestinians have truly shown humanity what it is to be human and how to resist. And as many have said, are truly the most free people in this world. So the level of, you know, monstrosities and inhumanity that they have, you know, doled out to us is really just a reflection of the truth of what resides within colonialists and you know, those that are hell-bent on maintaining this empire, all the, you know, Wall Streets and the capitalists that are making record profits from this genocide. You know, like they are directly responsible and we need to hold them to account. There have been, you know, wonderful protests by Jews and, you know, solidarity activists in New York at the stock exchange, and, you know, continue to support them and to just stand by as we continue to resist in every way we can against this dehumanization, because this is literally all of our humanity that is at stake.
Thank you, Nora, for those moving comments.
One more thing.
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, you know, when you mentioned the rapes and all that, back in 1878, all these treaties they made, they had to put a bad man clause in it. This bad man clause protects our women from being killed and mutilated and raped. It's called a bad man clause, and it protects our women from the cavalry, not only the cavalry, but the white population in general. You know, like in 2003, Levita Elk on the Pine Ridge Reservation over by Wounded Knee wanted to become a nurse and go in the army. And she was held off by her recruiter and he kept pulling her off, and finally he took her on the desolate road and did what you know, he couldn't do anything. The laws aren't against, a white man. It's always been that way. The only resource that she had was a Treaty of Laramie of 1868, the Bad Man Clause. And that's what she was awarded around $900,000 or something like that. Her transcripts are on, you can look them up, Levita Elk. And I think he was thrown in prison, this here recruiter. So, yeah, to go ahead, the dehumanization, and they transfer all of this here scalping, and they transfer all of this here mutilation on us when they were doing that to each other back in the 1000s. This is what they done to the Scots people. They put a bounty on every Scotsman for their scalp. They were well equipped before they came to this country. So it's just transferring it over to us. And what Riley said about going ahead and settling it in a different way. Sometimes during our battles, if we hit them with an eagle's feather, that showed your bravery. It did not kill anybody at all. But we could not understand the how they killed, how they massacred everything. We just couldn't understand it here. The true history, it's written by them. They were the victors. It's like us going over there and writing the history of Ukraine now. After the devastation is all done and all, and who was wrong and who was right. So, but anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I think the last point I'd like to address, just by way of suggestion, is the destruction of culture. Dehumanization targets individuals and removes their human status. But there's a bigger target if you rob a people of their cultural foundation, their institutions. And I know there've been some comments along those lines already, but I'd like to hear from you all again in terms of how culture has been physically and spiritually destroyed in the process of ethnic cleansing. Riley?
Actually, this ties into the next talking point as well when we're talking about the enslavement of the indigenous people. When we're looking at this full scenario, there was first contact. This is where the Taino died. This is where the Powhatan people were first interacting with the Puritans, and that's where a lot of the culture was starting to vanish. Well, the big cultural upheaval, I feel, from my own background, is the boarding schools. The boarding schools are the biggest blight on the indigenous people. There is nothing that can be done or said that would ever make right what happened in the boarding schools. The boarding schools started in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. People have heard the name Jim Thorpe. He's a very famous athlete that turned a lot of heads, and so he's seen as this success story of the boarding schools. When what happened in the boarding schools: rape, murder, beaten, forced labor. If you spoke your language, you were beaten. If you did something culturally specific, you could have been raped or worse. The Carlisle school, several bodies were exhumed and returned to their tribes. One of the boarding schools in Genoa, Nebraska, recently, I think it was 91 bodies that were recently exhumed from the Genoa, Nebraska school. The boarding schools touched every part of an indigenous life across the United States as well as Canada. And the boarding schools got to be so bad through the partnership between the US government and Canadian governments that Eventually the Vatican sent Pope Francis to go, what's going on? And Cindy got it right there, to beat the Indian out of the child. It was actually worse than that. Their exact words were to kill the Indian and the child to save the man. And it was designed to traumatize the child as brutally as possible. And the ages that were housed in these boarding schools got upwards of 25 years old. And when the Pope Francis, went and heard from the Cree, I wasn't necessarily moved by this, but he returned to the Vatican and repudiated the doctrine of discovery, but did not rescind it. And this is important because of our national sovereignty that is hung on this doctrine of discovery, and how these boarding schools and the BIA justified brutalizing children. So while yes, there are some upsides to an education from the BIA, I know from my personal experience growing up on the reservation, the BIA education was far greater than any education I have gotten off of the reservation. But then there's the historical aspect of it, of how much trauma had to be sustained in these boarding schools. When you look at trauma and how neurodivergency grows in place of where trauma is, people who have been traumatized have such bad forms of trauma that they can't cope. They can't take care of their kids. That it's like the drug pandemic on some reservations is astounding. I know with the EBCI is a good example. They have a lot of casino money that they are able to distribute to enrolled members, but that with all that money, people are getting hooked on drugs. When you look at the Paiute reservation that I lived on in Wadsworth, meth and all kinds of alcohol, various uh, nations actually have prohibitions on alcohol. So it's destroyed lives from the time that these kids were institutionalized into these schools to the time that they got out. And some of these kids were in their 6 years, 10 years. And it's just, I can't even put into words the amount of trauma that these poor children sustained. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there.
Larry, your words on cultural destruction?
Yeah, back then, before colonial contact, BC, right? Before Columbus, before casinos.
Yeah.
How about before COVID?
Mm.
Can we agree on something? Well, anyway, back then, before colonial contact, we had a distinctive political system, a leadership system stemming from our culture and our traditions, which addressed and honored our basic needs and values. Millions of our people living here existed with nature. They existed with the land. There was no wilderness. There was no untamed, savage land. Moccasins walked on Mother Earth. You know, they walked along the entangled streams, the rivers, the brooks, and the lakes, as well as the floor of this here great enchanted forest given to us by the Creator. This was home to our people. It was time that we blended our surroundings with it. You know, we had everything here. We had commerce, we had travel, we had economy, permanency, stewardship, inheritance, artistry, drama, ceremonies, mourning, healthcare, politics, justice, reparations. We had peacekeeping. We had everything here. In order to go ahead and then to disturb it, to go ahead and what? Cultivate us? There was a meeting in 1756, Madison, Franklin, all of them, the founding fathers, gathered with the Iroquois Confederacy. And they said, how can you 5 tribes live together as one? The Mohawk, being the speakers of the Iroquois Confederacy, said and told them about the white roots of peace, how to respect one another, not only one another, but respect all living things. Thus, using that information, if it was up to Thomas Jefferson, he was the most educated one there. We probably would have had a parliament here. I think he was educated in Oxford. But anyway, using that knowledge from the Iroquois Confederacy, the indigenous people here was the framework for the Constitution of the United States. They kind of missed on a few points and all that stuff, but that was the framework. Yeah, how they call it their own. So, I guess it's just the ones who own the media. They're the ones that got all of this here medicine. They're the ones who made all of these roads along our paths and everything. Yeah, they take credit for a lot of them. So I do know about transfer of guilt and everything, especially now in this political system. I don't have to lie for anybody. I can tell my own. But anyway, yeah, that's my take on what they took and especially the political part.
Thank
Okay.
you. And Nora, the Palestinian perspective.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with a lot of what Larry was just saying about the identity and one of the main things we've been taught to really lift up and focus on right now is like oral histories and telling our stories while these elders are still around, because the Nakba generation is slowly dying, and with it, that history that's been so systematically replaced by colonial history spanning over the last century, and just this period of oppression that has involved the sustained efforts to displace Palestinians. One of the main ways in which they do that is through stealing and erasing the cultural legacy. In response, of course, Palestinians have demonstrated unwavering resilience and firmly resisted these attempts. And through that, just, the creativity and the visible nature of like everything from the food to the debke to the art, the writing, the culture has been, on full display. And Zionists have tried to steal that as well, from the kafia to the dancing and the food, and try to make it their own, because they don't have their own. They have to rely on other customs and traditions to create that narrative of theirs, as if those are their symbols, trying to transform those cultural expressions and undermine Palestinians. But of course, Palestinians have shown in Gaza their ongoing resistance and resilience, using culture as a tool to continue to sing, to continue to come together, to teach each other, with nothing more than a tent over their head and chalk, just rocks or whatever that it takes. But the unwavering steadfastness has really just taught us, all the repression that we're getting for even saying the word Palestine in academia and in our workplaces. So many people are being fired for just stating, even to talk about peace and ceasefire has become like a charged word for these colonizers and their enablers, as though that is a crime. It's so astounding. It really just underscores the power that culture has probably more than guns or any weapon that we could potentially possibly use against them, is just upholding that culture and supporting it and standing by it. There's a wonderful group called PACB, Palestinian Academic Boycott Committee. And they, you know, there's really clear guidelines against normalization. Like, we don't boycott individuals, we boycott institutions, and we don't collaborate with, you know, things just for the sake of like peace, or just, you know, we have our, you know, anti-Zionist Jewish brothers and sisters that we partner with, you know, to do all kinds of programming and cultural events where there's overlap and shared, you know, values. And but there's been a really intense effort at normalizing through dialogue, which I think we all fell into that trap at some point, where, you know, why can't we all just sit down and talk it out? Whereas that does not, you know, define the, I mean, it does not undermine the structures that are causing the oppression and the violence, when, you know, it's just being looked at from an individual standpoint. So it's really critical that we understand the attempt to just steal that narrative, to undermine in, you know, just the connection to the land, to is the most important ways that Palestinians can stay connected to their culture, is through the land. And we can support them through being, you know, doing accompaniment work. There's a wonderful organization called FEZA. The website is defendpalestine.org. And if you're interested in learning more, you can go to join, /join, and fill out the form, and someone will be in touch with you about how you can get more involved. But I literally think that is the most important thing we can do in this moment, is to help Palestinians stay on their land, as 80+% of it has been appropriated in this past year. Over, you know, it's dramatically accelerated and continues to, you know, arm the most violent settlers, most right-wing extremist settlers of them. And it's currently the olive harvest. You know, Palestinians see these olive trees as their own family members, and tens of thousands of them have been cut down and burned down over the past years. And this is the most violent olive harvest that we had. Last year was the most violent. We're still in the process of this year. So the more people we can get there now, the more we can slow down this process of colonization and of land theft and of violent appropriation. So there's, you know, I know that it feels like so helpless and overwhelming, and I think that is by design. But just want to close by saying, like, in the words of the late great Rachel Corrie, that was killed by a US bulldozer for trying to defend a Palestinian home from being demolished, that I think it's worthwhile to just drop everything and commit ourselves to this cause, and to the struggle, because literally when we free Palestine, it is no over exaggeration to say that we will free much of the world, and the oppression and the colonization of all oppressed people through US and Zionist imperialism will eventually fall. So I would like to just stand with you all in taking these next steps to continue this fight.
Thank you very much, Nora. I'd like to try and open up the discussion for participation by attendees. You can raise your hand through Google, or possibly put in a question in the chat to any of the panelists or to all of us, and we'll see if we can reply. I see a hand up.
Yeah, that's me. Nadine, you're looking at me?
Yep.
I think there's a big economic factor here. You'll remember what happened with Oklahoma. The United States had a problem with what to do with the Cherokees and others. So they said, well, they got this land over there. It's north of Texas and south of the Kansas Territory, and it ain't worth much. It's pretty bad land. But let's give it to the Indians and put all the Indians in there. We'll call it Indian Territory, and they can do whatever they want in that get them out of our hair. So they moved the tail of Tier, the Cherokees were in all into Oklahoma, Indian Territory. And it started to work out, except that, my God, there's oil there. We can't have all these indigenous people in possession of all that wealth, all that oil. So that was the end of that. So it became what we now call Oklahoma, because it became wealthy. They couldn't stand it was all economics. We see it in Ukraine. Putin is he's taking children out of the Ukraine and trying to teach them to be Russians. And it isn't so much that he wants the land of Ukraine, but there's mineral wealth there. There's farmland. There's valuable resources in Ukraine. They're competing with Russian oil. They're competing with Russian grain. They're competing with Russian. So it's competition. He wants to quench the competition he's getting from there. So now they're talking about the Ukrainians are lesser people, and they're not important. They're inferior to the Russian culture and the Russian people. I think we have a strong economic component to this stuff. The ethnic, you can identify the ethnic people with some sort of an economic situation, and it justifies the oppression. Look what China is doing with the Uyghurs. We see it everywhere still. However, there are bright spots. The Greeks, for example, lived for 400 years under the oppression of the Ottomans and managed to preserve the culture. My father-in-law is Greek, my wife is Greek. And we go to Greece and he can read the ancient scripts that are carved on the stones there. And they never were assimilated. The Ottomans were never successful in fully assimilating the Greeks and getting rid of their culture. And it survived to today. So I think there are bright spots too. Some of these cultures, they do survive and they do continue and they do manage to live together with other cultures. But I don't know why that can't be applied universally.
Well, thanks for your comments, Donnelly. Let's take another question here. I believe the name is Eliezer.
Hi, my name is Eliezer. I was wondering if one of the speakers could address like what we can do on an individual basis for individual Indigenous people in our lives to help them if they are in the process of de-assimilating or retribalizing, to kind of foster that kind of confidence and that outspokenness about their identities, because my partner is Quechua and I've been kind of questioning recently what I can do to help them on that journey of rediscovering who they are and, reconnecting with that culture and identity in a way that also fosters political activism.
So Riley or Larry, any response?
Larry, do you want to take?
I have a nonprofit organization that kind of identifies the of who we are, and we're also taking it to the youth, organizing them and telling them of who they are. So, and it's based upon the rights of nature. We're telling them if we're going to preserve this planet for the next 7 generations, it's up to them. It's up to them to go ahead and save it for their children and their children's children. We messed it up. If I can eat a carrot when I was young like them, and the nutritional value that I got out of it, right now they have to eat 10 of them to have the same kind of nutritional value that I had out of my carrot. Now they're stepping up. Now they want to go ahead. I got a proclamation here. I got a treaty of unification a treaty that they will honor and that they will, treat with integrity whoever they sign it with. It's not like mainstream culture here. This government broke every treaty with the Indians. Take the land at all costs, make a treaty with them and then break it. This is what they've done. Now the kids can know and show mainstream culture how to go ahead and do a treaty. And they have a proclamation here. And I tell you what, if I don't have, I've never written a declaration, but I'll write a declaration protecting the Black River here. Keep it free flowing, keep it from contaminants, from pollution. This is what the kids can go ahead and do. They're stepping up and they're knowing who they are. They're knowing the land that they live on. We have to empower them. We have to give them ownership. This your education system, it's not working. This education system, the everything that we have, our language is different. Ours is like the Hebrew language. We talk in pictures. My dad's name is Haig Hovaness. It's the lightning that goes across the sky, and the Hovaness is the flash of white coming down. We talk in pictures, and it's kind of like flatlining, and if they want me to sit there, which I did, sit there for 3-4 hours listening to what low-grade clerical work, and I kind of fidget a little bit. Then they diagnosed me with some kind of a psychological disorder. They put some kind of acronyms on me. These are kids, let's empower them. They're our future. They're going to go ahead and start voting, and they're going to take down everything that we did. Hopefully they will. Anyway, we're empowering the young kids to go ahead and to stand up and be accountable for the rights of Mother Nature. It's called Mother Nature's Young Protectors. And I have this is their proclamation. And then this here is their treaty. Soon you will hear about them. They're going to be up there with Greta Thunberg and everybody heard of Sophie Kiana too, from the United Nations. She got a nonprofit organization called the Climate Cardinals. So if you ever want to look up something that's doing some environmental battles too, look up Sophie Kiani and Greta. So yeah, that's what we're kind of doing here.
Thank you, Larry. If you could put some of that information in the chat, that might help spread the word. So, a question from Barbara Lee.
Hi, I'm actually not Barbara, I'm Fran. Barbara sent me her link so I could get on the call. But I have a comment and a question. The comment is the disconnect that I experienced today walking through my small Northern California town on Indigenous Peoples Day, and there must have been 100 American flags set up. So for every national holiday, they put out all these American flags. And I hope I wasn't the only person that was shaking their head and, going, WTF? I mean, what a disconnect. So the question is for Noura. So I'm wondering, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but the genocide that has been taking place in Gaza, the timing of it feels engineered somehow, because apparently there was plenty of warning that this attack was imminent. There was intelligence from Egypt, the US. There were people even in Israel that were on the border there that saw it coming, because it feels like part of why my liberal friends, and I'm not a liberal anymore, the last year has completely destroyed my whatever liberal paradigm I held is gone. But they're all channeling their money toward Kamala Harris out of fear of Trump. And I just sent out, I'm trying to raise money for some families in Gaza that I'm in touch with, and I don't have the money to give them what I'd like to. So I've been trying, and they're telling me, well, I'm giving all my money to Kamala. But it feels like people are so distracted by the election, honestly, that they're not paying attention to what's happening in Gaza. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about the timing of this, because it feels suspect to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to know exactly how these these rulers plan their horrors, but it's clear that the end goal was always to rid, Gaza of the Palestinians, and obviously the West Bank is their main prize and desired like region or land that they truly want to take over first. But I think Gaza presented for them a problem because the resistance there has been unwavering and has been so strong and has not allowed Israel to continue. I think they wanted to reach the gas reserves that are numbering like $1 trillion right now. So someone was asking about the imperialism. The region is clearly highly strategic in terms of its location to Asia, to Africa, Suez Canal, and the transport of oil, which had been, increasingly difficult to access due to, like the ongoing colonization. And so all of these factors, I think, were coming to a head with Russia, with regards to the war in Ukraine and US's desire for global continued domination. So when you say, we're not conspiracy theorists, it's like you just put the pieces of the puzzle together and that nobody is talking about, and it makes sense that way. Like, we need to have an analysis, and no one's going to give that to us from the mainstream corporate media. So we need to look to the analysts who have been studying this like move towards fascism that has been knocking at our door, pounding down our door, and has now entered our door. We're not, at the precipice of fascism. It is here. And I think that largely is because the US empire is in such decline. Like, all the manufacturing jobs have gone, all of the industries are gone. Like, the world is investing in tech for violence and for AI to be used as weapons and mass destruction of civilians that, are not complying with the world order. This is seen like through the surveillance, the technology, through AI that's, high powered this genocide. And I truly do think everything is at stake in this moment. And that's why the stakes are so high. So it's all or nothing for this empire. And the US knows that, Israel knows that, and that's why they're pulling out all the stops. It is truly a war of, what do they call it? Like ideological survival for both worlds. And that's where we as Palestinians look to indigenous wisdom and leadership for, like, I'm a socialist. I definitely relate to the system of socialism as a scientific formula or way to understand the world as it stands today. And if you look at it from that perspective, we're at the final stages of capitalism. And so there's not too much left to exploit globally that hasn't been exploited. And so the remaining sources of resources that they want to access have been, harder to access as the world wakes up to these policies. And that's why the resistance in Yemen and in Lebanon and throughout the axis of resistance has been truly the only one standing up to this bullying that the US has, brought to the world through might makes right doctrine. And that's what's at stake. I mean, all these movies of like Armageddon, and I think that is the future if we don't stop them at, from carrying out this genocide. And so the best answer I would, offer is truly support the resistance unequivocally, unabashedly, and I think that's truly what distinguishes us as liberals to, being true progressives and, revolutionaries even, is to say that by any means necessary, the people have a right to fight for their rights and their land, despite, their greatest efforts at criminalizing us, at scaring us into submission. This is truly the moment that is going to define our future, for the future of humanity and our children. Yeah, we have no other choice if we want to see a future that's sustainable.
Thank you. Thank you, Nora.
Question from Elaine?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, I'm an older person. I was born in 1940, and ever since I've been born, there's been war and conflict. I mean, it's enough to drive you crazy. And I've heard about the treaties over and over and over again. And my curiosity is, and then they just send up the thing that says Indigenous sovereignty. I guess that's on Jill Stein's program. I don't understand why it hasn't happened. And I see they say treaties are technically enforced. Well, if they're enforced, why haven't the lands been returned, or why hasn't there been some restitution? And then when this last woman talked, it's all of a sudden I felt like the only way that we're going to solve this is through some sort of revolution. And the Russian Revolution showed us that, God only knows who's going to take over if there's a resolution. So it's very confusing to me how any of this is going to be resolved. I mean, all of a sudden I feel more depressed getting on than before in listening to all this stuff, how terrible it is and how nothing is getting done. And I mean, how would Jill Stein be able to have anything like this happen if she happened to win? It doesn't, how does this take place? And so I'm just expressing my confusion and a little bit of my depression. I mean, I've been working on things like this for years and years and years, and I just feel like sometimes I feel like it's really hopeless. So I wish we'd address that. I mean, why is it not happening? And why can't we get it in the court? And why isn't there any restitution? And do people think that the only way we're going to solve it is through some sort of revolution? That's a lot, I know, but that's how I'm feeling and listening to all this.
Well, as a Green, let me interject. Many historical processes are very slow moving, like glaciers. There were soldiers in Oliver Cromwell's army who died for democracy, and the British crown was restored after Cromwell. And some of the greatest outrages in Ireland were committed under Cromwell's rule. So I think it's premature to abandon hope for a more humane world, a world where people are not demonized, where cultures are not destroyed, because the voices of the truth are increasingly accessible. The forum we're in right now is one that is competing on unfavorable terms with mass media, but it exists. It did not exist 20 years ago. And this shift of media power toward the people will grow steadily, I believe, and the Greens will become more prominent as the ruinous policies of the Uniparty become evident. The real peril is escalation to nuclear war, because then all bets are off. But if we can get through this very turbulent period, I think Democratic socialism will emerge because there's no practical alternative. Capitalism, with its neglect of externalities, is just ravaging the environment and spawning endless violence. So I wouldn't despair at this point. Just be cognizant of the fact that historical machinery is creaky and it moves very slowly. And I believe it will move in the right direction. But I
Okay.
welcome comments of others if you have some hopeful responses to her bewilderment.
Don't despair. Don't despair. I'll tell you a story.
Oh,
Okay, this is Haddon here. All right.
whose hand was up next, Robert or Riley?
I don't know.
Riley was before me.
Go ahead, Riley.
I just wanted to say, don't despair. I'm going to tell you a story. I had a good friend, Skipper Hammond, who was a friend of mine in the Green Party here in Michigan. And Skipper married a Native American named Wes, who was an elder in a tribe up in northern Michigan, near South Traverse City. About 5 years, maybe 6 years ago, we were up north for some other reason, and we were invited to a powwow. It was a powwow of tribes from all over the Midwest and Canada, and they were having a big celebration at the land that belonged to the tribe up there. And I went up to it, and they were dancing, and there was people eating and whatnot, and it was a big celebration. And they were dancing, and there was a group of people in the center of the ring with drums, and they were playing the drums for the dancers and chanting something in a language I couldn't understand. So I said, Wes, I can't understand it. What language is that? And what are they saying? Wes says, they're praying. What are they praying? They're saying, oh, Great Spirit, please come down and kill all the white people and kill all the black people and give us back our land. Oh, and damned, we heard a squawk, and there's a bald eagle flying overhead. And he says, see, the Great Spirit has heard. So, okay, we'll just wait. It'll happen.
Riley.
Her previous question actually ties in with Rita's cool question in the comments, asking about her thoughts on the signs of continuing genocide and the ignoring of the treaties, even though they are enforced, they're not really enforced. I know the Cherokee have been fighting for quite a while to get their delegate recognized by U.S. Congress. They have their person elected, but the U.S. refuses to acknowledge them. So we're still seeing the last vestiges of this doctrine of discovery that is still holding onto us in full force. And the only way that we're going to be able to overcome this would be mass organizing. I'm working with the Jill Stein campaign and the Green Party to build the Indigenous Caucus as a answer to this, so that way Indigenous people can and supporters can get involved in Indigenous politics, and allowing the Indigenous to have the voice in the political system that they otherwise do not have. And this is extremely important in this election, especially if you pull up our ballot access map. If you notice in Oklahoma, South Dakota, especially, there is a very large number of Indigenous people that live in these states. Oklahoma has the Cherokee Nation, the Chickasaw Nation, the Osage, the Seminole, as well as others. About 50% of the Oklahoma population are dual citizens with these nations. However, there is no ballot access in Oklahoma. There is no ballot access in South Dakota, and we just lost ballot access in Nevada. There are large populations of indigenous people that do not have access to a third party vote. And this is this continuation of this issue here. So we've got half the population of indigenous people here that really and truly do not have a third alternative or any alternative outside of the duopoly, with the Democrats literally leading the world in a genocide, and the Republicans whose elected officials really get out there and make racist statements saying that, oh, the tribes don't like you, they'll just chuck a beer can at the back of your head. It's this continuation of this constant dehumanizing to put the bourgeoisie, the ruling elite, up top where they feel they rightfully belong. In fact, reading the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, you can then you can understand that what Marx was saying compared to the perspective of the indigenous. When we're talking about global unity and international solidarity, it's just not possible without solidarity with the indigenous people. And so the only way that we are going to fully recover from this genocide and state of ethnic cleansing would be for universal ballot access and universal suffrage for all people, not just voting age people, the Democratic and Republican parties.
Thanks, Riley. Yeah, Bob, you've got your hand up, Bob Saberi.
Yeah, hi. I just first of all want to thank the panel. Great discussions, very personal, and I just want to express my appreciation. Yeah, I think I think all of us, if we work, in activism, we get frustrated when we see what's happening. But we have to remember that there are living victims of what's going on. Both the indigenous Americans and also Palestinians. And someone mentioned Fazah, I think. There are organizations, Fazah, International Solidarity Movement. There's one organization for Jewish people to go over there and work in solidarity with Palestinians, do protective presence. And it's very valuable in many ways. It does protect them to a certain extent. Their settlers are less violent when they're international activists present, but it provides also moral support for the people there, and they also get the feeling that they're being heard, which is a big issue. And so I think we have to keep that in mind. They also, particularly in the West Bank, Gaza, you can't get any money in there. But one of the weapons that Israel is using against the Palestinians is that they're strangling their economy. They have roadblocks in all the major cities, and sometimes even into the villages, so that people can't freely travel in or out. And they throw up these roadblocks at will. So, and it's very difficult. A friend of mine, a Palestinian friend of mine in the village of Al in Masafer Yatta, is one of the few people that has a job. He distributes produce, and they stopped him. They wrecked his truck that he depends on, that he owes, copious amounts of money to. And so we're, group of us got together and sent him money so he can help support the village, because you're not supporting individuals there. They have a very strong knit community, and they help one another. Most of the Palestinians that worked in Israel obviously are not working now, and they haven't for the last whole year. So they're suffering financially, and That's a very direct way of giving aid to the people, and they desperately need it.
Thanks, Bob. All right. I don't see any further questions or comments. I think perhaps we can close with some final statements for, it's hard to sum up this topic in a few words, but I'd like to give the last word to the panelists. So Riley, any concluding comments?
No matter your path, no matter who you are, there is a saying that I heard growing up that everyone in the world belongs to a clan. And the indigenous clans were all about family cohesion and a society that was just structured better. And there's a deep spirituality when you find this community. And one of the previous questions was how to get involved or how to connect. And the best thing that I can say is if you're interested in learning about indigenous issues, indigenous culture, indigenous anything, go find the nearest nation or find the closest indigenous person to talk to. Indigenous people are the friendliest people that you will ever meet in the world, and they will do everything that they can to help you understand whatever questions you have regarding life on the res or just life in general with the boarding schools or the trauma that is just associated with healing from all this. So being that we are a peace party, I want to leave this on a note of peace and love and understanding. And so that way we can put that out into the universe and rebuild some of those bonds that were destroyed under first contact, the boarding schools and removal.
Okay, Larry, some final comments?
Yeah, I guess I can say to everybody, there's an old saying, evil happens when good people do nothing. And like I want to go ahead, I'm over 70 years old, and I wish there'd be more younger people coming up, stepping up, and I think there is. They got a proclamation. Would you guys want to hear it? It's short. His proclamation, it says, as ordained by the founders and the delegates of Mother Earth's Young Protectors. Mother Earth's Young Protectors is a movement of Native youths in preserving civilization as a whole. We are standing up for the rights of nature for future generations. This decree of intent is to call on all Native youth, advocates from the north, south, east, and west, to come together concerning the atrocities and the offenses that are being committed against Mother Earth. Mother Earth's Young Protectors sends out a global distress call concerning the violence against Mother Earth and all sacred beings that live on her. Mother Earth's Young Protectors in preserving civilization as a whole. This includes the respect of humanhood and naturehood, allowing them to perpetuate and to be maintained and to be preserved for the next 7 generations. Mother Earth's Young Protectors is commissioned by the elders in their beliefs to stand up and be accountable for the rights of nature and for the people who live in harmony and balance with one another. Mother Earth's Young Protectors recognizes all of the attributes that our ancestors has given the world. Western civilization discovered America, but has not truly discovered the New World. Mother Earth's Young Protectors therefore takes the responsibility to make it known that the New World resides in the beliefs of our people. Mother Earth's Young Protectors' concluding belief is to recognize all the Native and Indigenous youth as one, bringing harmony and balance into view for all the world to see and live by. These are the ones that are going to go ahead and be the next one. I probably won't see it, but, I have hope for them. And, you know, the knowledge that they're going to have is what we give them. And that's what you're going to go ahead and give your young people. So I'm hopeful for them. And they don't know the meaning of no, can't. They're going to go ahead and do it. So, hey, skekste in my language. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. Nora, your final comments.
Wow, it's so hard to follow that. And yeah, just summarize this rich discussion. But at the end of the day, I really find, when it's so hard to go on and when it just seems like there's no way to continue to do this work because it is so overwhelming and so horrifying. I just remember that's literally by design. That's what they want us to do, is to feel overwhelmed and want us to give up. And that and the steadfastness of the people in Palestine, just, witnessing that daily struggle, day in and day out, it's what keeps me going when I'm, no longer able to, get out of bed. Sometimes you just need to stay there and just, take a moment to, reflect and to lick your wounds and to do what you need to do before you get up and fight another fight. Like, it is a long, protracted struggle, and we need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of each other. This one thing this year has done has really helped us find our people. Like Riley was saying, that is so critical. And the antidote to all this despair is having a community and to come together in these dark times. And continue to struggle, to resist on every front. We can't neglect any of them. I know some people aren't into, direct action or boycotting or elections, and we don't have to do all of that. Not everyone can be on the ground, but you can support, you can write your Congress people, you can give money, and all of that is needed. We need everyone in the movement. We need all the, forces working together. I'm going to hit up Riley to, go back to Indigenous wisdom, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to save us. I truly believe that. And if we can manage to just find some basic ability to organize, it doesn't take much. It's literally, it's 3% of the population, I think they said, is all that it takes to create that revolution. And we have the numbers, we just don't have the organization. So just support, you could join an org, reach out to me, to others, provide, whatever resources you can, and or just help spread the word of the resistance, because there is so much that's happening and that need your support, that we can't give up. This is the moment of truth, y'all. So let's keep on going and stick together, overcome our differences. Whenever there's harm, try to repair it. Don't just write people off or dispose people away. We need everyone. So thank you for being here and all your work and commitment. And go Greens, 2024 or 2028. Inshallah, we will prevail.
All right, I'd like to thank the participants, the speakers, for their insightful and heartfelt comments, quite moving to me. And thank all the attendees for joining us. And I too would counsel against despair. The ability to remain steadfast in the face of hardships and to continue serving the interests of the world's people are what keep me going. And I'm privileged to be joined by like-minded people like yourselves. So on that note, thanks to all for joining this event, and together in solidarity, we'll say good night.
Good night. Appreciate you all. Go Jill and Butchware.
Good night,
Deals done
everyone.
2024.
Yeah.